Hey everybody, we are in the last few chapters of the book of Daniel. And then we move on to Hosea for a month. This is a really intriguing section, these last couple chapters. Chapter 10 is kind of the description of what is happening, setting up the context. So Daniel is out walking alongside the Tigris River and in Babylon, and he has this spiritual encounter with this being that is kind of beyond description. And he's the only one that can see this being. There's other people around, they can't see it, but they have this terror about them and run off in a panic. And Daniel himself is kind of really freaked out. And the language here is used elsewhere in the Bible, probably to talk about, about the Son of Man, about Jesus. So we see the same language being used in the book of Ezekiel. We see it again in the book of Revelation, of this being that kind of has the appearance of a man, but is so much kind of bigger and brighter and scarier and more powerful than you can see. We also have this key phrase that gets used by usually by God or angelic beings that are representing God, where this person tells Daniel, "Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid." So this is a kind of repeated phrase throughout the Bible that whenever you see it, this is someone who is either God himself or speaking on God's behalf. So you see it, for example, in Gabriel talking to Mary, or you see it in when the angels visit Abraham. This is a common theme. So this is either an angelic being or most likely, I think, this is Jesus speaking. And he's describing this situation, saying, look, I was detained. I'm fighting this battle against the Prince of Persia. And the Prince of Greece is about to come, and you're like, what is this talking about? And Daniel here essentially gets a sneak peek behind the scenes into the spiritual dimension. So there's constant spiritual warfare going on that Daniel is not privileged to. He can't see with his human eyes, but there's this constant spiritual battle that's raging behind the scenes. And this person has come from the battle. He has this important news to tell Daniel about another spiritual battle that's just beyond the horizon. And so he begins to describe this, and the description happens in chapter 11. And the description is an actual historical event that takes place after the fall of Greece. The fall of Persia. So Persia is the reigning empire kind of near the end of Daniel's time. They eventually get conquered by Alexander the Great, the king of Greece. And Alexander conquers Persia on his way to India, and eventually he succumbs to disease and dies. And his whole kingdom, this massive kingdom that stretches all the way to the west of Greece and all the way into North Africa and then all the way to India, is this new Greek empire. And essentially it gets divided between his four generals into four different kingdoms. Two of these kingdoms are what we need to pay attention to, because one of them is the Ptolemy kingdom, and that is the kingdom that is mainly centered around Egypt. And the other one is called the Seleucid kingdom, which is in kind of Syria, so just to the north of Israel. And both of these, why this is important is because Israel is in between these two new kind of kingdoms, these two new Greek kingdoms that get set up. And basically, all of chapter 11 describes in great detail the history that happens over hundreds of years between these two kingdoms, that sometimes they have an alliance and they are working together, but most often they are actually at odds. And Israel, being in the center of it, is often the victim of these ongoing squabbles and battles between these two Greek kingdoms. Eventually, the story gets highlighted by a ruler that gets raised up, who then imposes himself on God's people in Israel. He rises up and persecutes God's people. He sets up an altar to the god Zeus in the middle of the temple and demands people to renounce their Jewish ways and adopt Greco-Roman or Greek ways at the time. and this causes a massive war that happens. A bunch of people, of God's people, get persecuted or killed or even repent of their own faith and adopt these Greek ways, and it's this time of turmoil and chaos. It feels like the end of the world is happening. And all of chapter 11 goes on to describe how bad this scene is when this guy becomes king and starts persecuting God's people. But you'll notice the very last verse of chapter 11 then goes on to say, but in spite of all this guy and all his power and all the bad things that he's doing and all the amount of time that he's been doing this, actually he'll come to his end and no one's going to remember him. The end. That's it. So chapter 11 is this big setup of this big bad guy and all the bad things that he's going to do and how he's going to make life for God's people miserable, but he comes to a quick end. And that's it. And then in chapter 12, we have the conclusion of the story, which is in the midst of all this, God has been setting up his eternal kingdom. And those who remain faithful are going to be called to be a part of that kingdom where there's no more warfare, there's peace where God rules and reigns, and we know that we are secure in him. And so I find it really striking that, there's this hectic scene that's happening throughout these last chapters that causes Daniel to be afraid and be intensely worried. And then this person, whether it's Jesus or an angel, goes on to describe, this event's going to happen. It's going to be pretty terrible at the time. And it's going to seem like the world is ending. But you know what? That person, they're like a mist. They're going to be gone in a second because God is going to remove them. And in its place, God is going to set up his forever kingdom where his people can be safe and they can enjoy peace once again. And it's a reminder to me, the end of Daniel, that when we find ourselves in similar situations, when everything is going to pot, the bad guys seem to be winning, the world seems to be coming to an end, that it's actually just a moment, a brief moment in time compared to God's forever kingdom. And that if we stay faithful to him, and hold on to him despite the appearance of the world falling apart, then we get to have this promise of this same forever kingdom for us and ourselves, where we will dwell in safety and be God's people with him as our king. So that is the hope as we end Daniel, and that is kind of the constant theme that has run through the book, that despite appearances, God is in control. So hold on to him and his promises. May his promises carry you forward. So that's Daniel. We're going to move into Hosea next week. Hope that was really helpful, and we'll see you next time. Bye.